So last class, we start chapter 5. So we construct a closed economy, one period macro model, right? It's closed economy, and one period model. And using this model, we understand what does economic efficiency and what does Pareto optimality means. And today, so what are we going to do? First, I'm going to kind of quickly review what's optimality, what is Pareto optimality. And then, so we are going to use the model we developed in previous class to understand the following positive questions. Or so if there's an increase in government spending or there's an increase in total factor productivity, how the economy is going to respond. If there's a distortion tax on wage income, how that affect the tax revenue. And then furthermore, we are going to study Laffer curve. This is going to be a new concept we are going to introduce today. Okay. So this is still chapter 5. Now I'm going to use this graph as kind of a review what we discussed last time. Right. So where we start? We start with, by the way, so this is for consumer, right? What the consumer cares, they cares about C and L. So now look at it here. So on the horizontal line is leisure, our vertical line is consumption. And along this line, so we have indifferent curve, meaning so the households are going to get the same level of well-being or happiness. And then for the households, what they care is, okay, so I'm going to move this curve further away from the origin. But the household is going to usually subject to a budget constraint, something like this. Okay, so they're going to subject to a budget constraint. Right. And then the best the household can do is just choose the consumption bound such that this indifferent curve is going to tangent with the budget constraint. And then, so what we have for the households, if they take wage as given, is going to MR is leisure consumption equal to wage. Okay, so this is for households. Now we switch to firm side. Okay. Firm, okay, so they take the wage as given, so they're going to maximize profit, but profit equal to output minus W times N minus R times K. But this is fixed, and then we can ignore, right? So they're going to choose labor demand. And then, so they're going to subject to this production possibility. So essentially, so what combination of C and L they can produce, right? So in the equilibrium or the best, the firm can do is to choose labor demand such that marginal productivity of labor equal to wage. Wage is exogenous given, right? So this is what we discussed earlier. Okay. Now in competitive equilibrium, what happens is so both sides take wage as given. Okay, from the households, they're going to choose marginal rate of substitution, leisure equal to wage. On the right hand side, so you have firms, marginal productivity of labor, okay, equal to wage. Okay, and this also is going to give us labor demand equal to labor supply. So this is in competitive equilibrium, right? So now what is Pareto optimal? So in the Pareto optimal, instead of a wage, instead of a market, now we can think there's a fictionary social planner. What is a social planner? The easiest way you can think about this is some like dictator. But this dictator has goodwill or is benevolent in economics. Meaning, so this dictator really cares about the welfare of the entire society. But certainly here is very simple because you have only one household, or we call it representative household, everyone's same. There's one firm or all firm the same. So it just cares about the firm, it cares about the households. What the social planner is going to do is going to tell he or she is going to tell you how much to consume, how much to work. All right. Or in other words, there's no such thing as wage. It just disappeared. And then, so this social planner is going to subject two things. One, is there production possibility from here, or what does the technology looks like? Okay, to what extent they can convert C to L, or to what extent they can convert L to C. At the same time, the social planner is going to face this indifferent curve, because this is how households going to value different combination of C and L. But clearly, so the best that they can do is going to let indifferent curve and then the PBL tangent with each other. So in that sense, so the household is going to move away, because the further away from the region is better for the households. Certainly, you want to have something like this. You have higher indifferent curve, but this is not feasible. And also, you may want to have something like this. This is also not this, but this is inefficient, right? Because certainly you can just move, you can just improve from here to here, or you can improve from here to here, right? So this is what the social planner would like to do, just push these further away. Not only that, but now you just think about the consumer, the producer. For the producer, so they're going to, so they can just produce any combination along this line. But only here, this is going to the best solution for both consumer and the firm. So let me just further explain to you what this means. Let me erase here. Right. So as I explained, so if we have a curve like this is not feasible, right? Because this is anything along here is not what you can produce. Now, but the interesting part is if we have a indifferent curve, I said with them here, let you start the line. Okay. Now, if you look at here, right? So why we look at here is because certainly you want to produce on your frontier. And you look at it here because this is on your indifferent curve. Okay. Now look at it here. So actually this point, you can improve for both. Why? Now let's see, so look at here what happened. So here, so if you just draw a tangent line, okay, this is an indifferent curve. Let's call it I2. Okay, so then, so clearly you can see what happens here. So you have a, let me write it here. So you have a marginal rate of substitution between leisure and the consumption. And clearly this one, let's just call this slope. Let's call use W hat. Okay, so differentiate from the weight we have earlier. Let's call this slope here. So clearly this is greater than W hat. But now similarly, you can draw a tangent line around here for this PBA. All right, but then so clearly, so this gives you marginal rate of transformation, leisure to C. So this is less than W star. Now what this means? So first of all, at this dot, if we push to this direction, meaning we increase leisure. Now I'm going to explain to you. So this is going to be better off for both consumer and firm. Start with consumer. So here, if we push to this direction, okay, and so what this means, by the way, at this point, so you have a marginal rate of substitution, meaning so at which rate the consumer is willing to substitute L for C is very high. It's very, very high. Or in other words, they must give a lot of leisure, willing to give a lot of leisure for consumption, right? It's very high. Why? It's because right now, so they really cares about leisure, right? Because there are a lot of consumption. So now, if you just push to this direction, okay, and then so basically, so you're going to reduce this number, It's going to make the consumer better. On the other hand, if you look at the firm, so the firm at this dot, right? So this just tells their marginal rate of transformation. So this just tells them at which rate you can convert L to C. It's very low, right? So now if we push to this side, it's going to increase their marginal rate of transformation, meaning they're going to be more profitable. Right, to summarize, at this point, if you move to this direction, you're going to make households better because they are willing to give up C. Okay, actually, so they are going to derive more utility from leisure. And for the consumer, for the firm, so at this point, they are willing to give up. Sorry, they are willing to hire let's see, so hire less, right? So that they are going to increase their marginal productivity. Right. So in either case, to move to this direction is going to be a better off solution for both consumer and firm. Similarly, if we are here, so if you move to this direction, it's going to be better off for both. Until we reach this point, we reach the optimal. Right. So this is Pareto optimal. This is from the social planner point of view. But remember, there's no wage. There's no wage. Because for the social planner, he or she doesn't need a wage. He or she just tell you what to consume, how much to work. Okay. Now, the two welfare theorem we discussed are the following. Number one, the first one says competitive equilibrium is Pareto optimum, or in other words, once we reach this competitive equilibrium, you really cannot improve the well-being without sacrifice somebody else. Right? So at the surface, this is a little bit strange, and this is a little bit against our intuition, because from our previous education, usually you think so people need to do some sacrifice or should care about others, care about the others in the society. But then here it seems like, okay, so someone only cares about themselves. So actually, this is in complete equilibrium. Someone who only cares about themselves, and then we reach the social optimal. We don't need those altruism. We don't need you cares about others. This is kind of against our earlier education. But then, so what's how we reconcile these two? This is because in this framework we only have representative households, representative firm. So later, if we have heterogeneous, or meaning you have different households, different firm, and then the discussion may be slightly different because you need to care about who, you need to care about who or to what extent you're going to care about those particular individual, right? The second welfare theorem just says the Pareto optimal. From there, you can construct a competitive equilibrium. To construct such competitive equilibrium, very simple. You just choose a wage equal to the marginal rate of transformation. And then, so you send the signal to the market. Market is going to clear. Everything is going to be clear. Right. So now let's look at some case study, right, to understand, or to use our model to understand some case study, right? Let's just start with this American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. So the background of that act we call ARRC. This ARRC, right? Right. ARRA. Okay? So the background of this ARRA is that the U.S. economy falling into the worst recession since Great Depression. To help the economy or to rescue the economy, the U.S. government has decided to stimulate the economy, right? They spend a lot of money, right? So this is the amount they spent. So in 2008, they spent 787 billions, right? In terms of government spending, so this G, so by the way, so this is budget. So because here, so this is not only including the purchase of goods and services, also includes transfer, right? So by the way, 290 goes to the change in terms of total spending go to spending, right? But based on our model, like, so the effect on the GDP, by the way, so here, so the increase G is trying to lift up Y, right? So actually, so in the previous class, we have this simple exercise. If G increase, there's an income effect, and then both C and the leisure will decrease, but this implies labor supply is going to increase, hence the output is going to increase, right? But then our models suggest, so the effect our GDP will be less than this amount. I mean, less than this amount, right? Why? Because there's a crowding out. You're going to crowding out private consumption. Okay. However, Keynesian macroeconomists usually believe our economists is not operating on the PBA, or not on the frontier, or not efficient. Okay. And then, so the increase in GDP will be more than 290 because the government can help us to restore the efficiency. Right? But in this class, we are going to focus on like a non-Keynesian view, right? So this is what we're going to focus. But first, look at some data. Here we have government expenditure as a percentage of GDP. Okay. So this number should up very high. Okay. So this is after World War II, right? From here, you may have an impression the government becomes smaller and smaller over time. But however, if you look at here, so this is total government outlay. But now you can see, so the government is getting larger and larger. You may wonder, so what's the difference, or how we understand, or how we combine these two graphs? Okay. So the government outlay actually includes government spending, G, like purchase goods and service. Okay. If we look at here, so that is essentially here. So government expenditure, it is indeed declining. That means the direct purchase of goods and service is declining. So what is considered as direct purchase of goods and service? So if you give them the government purchase military, like a national defense. Okay. But this government outlay, or basically the government payment, the outlay essentially is just the sum of all payments by the government. Also includes transfer. What is transfer? So transfer, to the example, Social Security in the US. Okay, Medicare. Okay, so this is the healthcare for elderly and for disabled. So these are transfer because the government gives you money as a return. There's no goods and the service are required to provide it. That is transfer. And then furthermore, so there's a cause of borrowing. Remember, so the government borrows, right? So they borrow to finance some of the spending. Okay, so to summarize, the difference between this graph and this graph, largely coming from here. And over time, it is increasing largely because the transfer is increased. So in 1960, so United States, under the President Lyndon Johnson, he has a program called Great Society. So they create Social Security, Medicare, right? So that make the government transfer ever larger or increasing over time, right? Now let's go back to here. So the ARRA. Okay, so we are trying to understand what's the impact, right? So our model, so actually it's probably close to here. It's close to Borrow suggests. Borrow is a very famous neoclassical macroeconomist. He suggests the impact on the aggregate output is going to close to zero because they're crowding out. But then, so the Obama administration, so they have their own economists. They would suggest this number is pretty large. And why there's discrepancy? Why there's a difference? It's because here, so usually they believe our economy is not operating on the PBA, or there's some inefficiency. And then the government spending to help us to restore to the frontier. So that's why the number is much larger. But overall, our model says the effect is going to smaller than 1 because of the crowding out. But I must admit, this is not the basic framework for this to analyze the ARRA, because our model is a little bit too simple, right? Why? Because we don't have unemployment and we don't have idle resources. Okay? Actually, so the existence of unemployment, by the way, is the unemployment rate during the financial crisis or 2008, 2008, we got Great Recession. At some point exceed 10%. And then the government spending is going to help to bring down this unemployment. So in that sense, so that's why they want to have physical stimulus, right? You may wondering, so if this is not the best framework to analyze the current issues, why we start this simple model? So this is because even though we introduce those complex stuff, the analysis more or less the same, maybe the analysis is different. On the other hand, so using simple models easier to analyze, it will give a better insight. So that's why we choose to use a simple model, right? So now we move to the second case study to understand if there's an increase in TFP, right? So what is TFP? That stands for total factor productivity. So what is the example of increase in TFP? Technological innovation, like in 1990. So the introduction of I think started in 1980. The introduction of personal computer, like 2000, the widespread use of internet, and now also you have artificial intelligence, right? So those are considered an increase in TFP, because that's just improve how we produce, improve our technology level. An increase in TFP is going to have two effects. Right? If effect number 1, so we are going to produce more with the same amount of labor. So essentially, so the curve is going to push up. And secondly, so the PPF is going to getting steeper. Why is going to getting steeper? Because the marginal productivity of labor equal to Z times. So if you're familiar with calculus, it's going to F, which is the production, take the derivative with respect to N. Right? So if this increase, then the entire value increase, meaning marginal productivity of labor is going to increase. So that just means the curve becomes steeper, right? Because the curve, the slope of the curve is indeed the marginal productivity of labor. Okay? So this is represented by this diagram, right? So on the horizontal line, we have labor. On the vertical line, we have Y. This is the production function. This is for given K. Right. If Z1 increase to Z2, at first this curve is going to shift up at a higher level. It means for any given level of N, you're going to produce more. This is first effect. Second effect, you can see, so the curve is getting steeper, right? At the same level of N. Why is it getting steeper? As I just said, so in the margin, in the margin, one additional unit of labor can produce more because the Z is increasing. Now let's see. So what's going to be competitive equilibrium effect of increasing TFP? First, we need, what do we need? So we need convert, let's go back to previous one, convert this production function into this PPF, okay, into this PPF, right? So this is the original. So this AB, so AB is original, right? And then, so the AB is going to shift to AD, right? So this is with Z1, this is with Z2. Now you can see, so we can produce more and more efficient. right? So if you just signal here, so leisure equals 0, so this is the maximum amount of work. So you can produce way more almost double, right? So if you compare D versus B, it produces more. And the second is curve is getting steeper, right? So now when the TFP increase, so you have you move from this line, sorry, this curve to this curve, right? Now you're going to see the equilibrium is going to change from F to H, right? So why the equilibrium change from F to H is because now you are going to move your indifferent curve. If you stay in the same indifferent curve, this is not efficient, right? Because you just inside. Because if you consume anything along this line, you're going to inside the PBF. You are not using all your resource. So in that sense, inefficient. So only you hit here. So that's what we discussed in previous lecture. When you hit here, we reach the equilibrium, or this is efficient. Now, the next thing we need to understand is, so what happens? We move from F to H. Like I said in previous slide, so the TFP increase is going to have two effects. One, you're going to produce more. Secondly, so the MPN is going to increase. But now think further. So what does produce more means? Essentially, your income is going to increase. Okay, what does MPN increase means? That just means your wage is going to increase. Right? Now just think about those impact on the consumer. So if your income increase, consumer, because consumer cares about C and L, consumption and leisure. If income increase, both are normal goods, and then the C is going to increase. L is going to increase. But a wage increase, what this means? Okay, wage essentially is the opportunity cost, of leisure. If wage increase and then leisure is going to decrease. Or in other words, so the TFP increase is going to have two different impacts on leisure, but immediately means they're going to have two distinct impacts on labor supply. Right here, so we just construct a particular case such that, so these two effects cancel each other, so such that the leisure doesn't change. But we need to decompose these two. So this is what we're going to do in the next slide. Right. So understand that. So we are going to do the following. In the first step, remember we start from here, right? So let's just label them. So this is B, this is A. And then we go to D, right? So we move from A, B to AD. But move from AT to AD, so in terms of your, in terms of PBF, there are two changes. Change number one is increase the total level or total output or total income. Number two, so the curve becomes steeper, increase MPN. But remember, as I just explained in previous slides, so these two has distinct impact on consumption and leisure. So now we need to isolate them and study them one by one. So what we can do is we first draw these PBF3. Now, so what is particular about PBF3? So PBF right here, PBF3. So if you compare PBF3 with AD, you can see they are going to share same shape, or to be precise, that same slope or same margin of activity of labor. Right? But on the other hand, so PBF also shares something with AB. Okay, so they share something with AB in the sense, so the PBF3 is going to tangent with the original indifference curve. So what this means? So that's the essential just means, so technical, that's the essential means, so we draw a PPF3 such that, so your total income is equivalent to A. Because you should get the same level of indifference. You just switch, or you just change your composition of C and L. So hence you move from A to B. I apologize, we probably use something different. Anyway, so we move from this dot to this dot. That's coming from original PPF to the middle PPF. The only change is what? Because you keep the income level, right? So only change is because here. Actually, we call this substitution. You substitute what? You substitute consumption for leisure. Why you do such substitution? Is because move from original PPF to PPF3, wage increase, leisure more expensive. Okay, so this is substitution. Now we're going to move from D to B, and then what we care is about B, right? Because that's the new, this is the new PPF with a higher level indifference curve. Now from D to B, like I said, so we construct a PPF such that the PPF has the same shape as the final PPF. Hence, the only difference between PPF3 and AD or the final PPF is what? It's income level. It's income level. So let's go to here. This goes to here. Or we call income effect. Okay. And this income effect, it just increase C and leisure. Actually, you compare D to B, so you can see you move to this direction. Right? Now let me just summarize. We erase everything and summarize. Okay. So what we care is to understand what happens when we move from A to B, because there are two impacts. One, your income is going to increase. Two, the wage is going to increase. Right? So this is after TFP increase. Right? And they have different implications on consumption and leisure. But to understand their distinct impact, so we need to draw a third line PPF. Right? To summarize again, so the PPF, the PPF3 is going to share, implicitly share the same level of income as original PPF. Okay? But then this PPF3 is going to share the same level of slope. Let me write it here. Slope the same. And here, so the same income. That's quote unquote. Right? Because you are trying to, you construct PPF3 such that you're going to stay in the same I3, no I1. Right. Now, so A, you move from A to B, actually you come from, this is like intermediate step, D. So A to D is purely because you change your slope, right? So essentially you move from this one to this one. Okay, so you change your slope, but you keep your income level. But from D to B, you keep your slope, but you only change your, so here, you only change your slope, right? And then the first one, so this one we call it substitution effect. And this one we call the income effect. Okay. Now this slide is going to kind of summarize what we discussed. Okay. C increase unambiguously Y actually is right down. So you have income effect and a substitution effect. Oh, apologize. But you have income effect and substitution effect, right? Oh, sorry. So there's some technical issue. Right? So you have income effect. So by the way, so the TFP increase. So you have income increase, you have wage increase, and then this is going to lead to C increase. Leisure increase has and will decrease, labor supply decrease, right? Wage increase meaning so you're going to C is going to increase, and your labor supply. Wait a second. So income increase, leisure is going to increase, right? And the wage increase, right? So you're going to, yeah. So you don't want to take leisure because leisure becomes expensive. This is going to increase. So and then so this means C will increase, but N is a question mark, depending on which effect dominates. Like, and finally, regarding to other things like wage, yes, it's going to increase. Then Y is also going to increase, right? Because income effect. Okay. Now remember, so what is Z? Z is a technological progress. Right? And then this model, overall, this model is going to predict that technological progress will lead to the following things: consumption increase, output increase, wage increase, and there's some ambiguous effect, or there's no clear call in terms of how technology change our work. Now we are going to bring this to the data. Right? So what we know is that over time, Z increase. Okay, Z increase because we have better and better technology over time. Now let's see, so what happens to other variable? Consumption, yes, indeed, overall is increasing, right? Output, yes, it is also increasing over time, right? So this is consistent with what we found. Now, this compensation per worker essentially just give us a measure of wage. Yes, indeed, it is also increasing over time. We are still good, right? It seems overall, it seems the data consistent with this very simple model. Now, is that really a perfect model? We may look into the data in detail, and particularly we are going to examine the hours worked in the US since 1950. Right? So here's aggregate data we knew. Hours worked per person has been roughly constant since World War II. During this time period, like 50 years, it's barely changed, increased by 7%, very small. However, if we just take a closer look, what we found is hours worked for men has fallen, but hours worked for women has increased. So this show up in this table, right? So we have seen. So if you this is from 1950 to 2000. So this is like 50 years, right? So what do we see? If you look at total population, okay, hours work. So this hours work, right? So if you just look at overall, so this number changes very little. But if you look at the male, this number decrease, but still not too much different from the overall. However, if you look at female, so this number almost doubled. So in 1950, Irish American women, they work 11 hours. Okay, this is per week. Now they work almost 20 hours per week. Right? So to further understand what's going on, we need to look at this formula. So hours per person, this hours work. Okay, it's hours work, how many hours you work per person, actually this is per week, right? That equal to the total hours work. This is in our economy. This is economy-wide, right? So you just clock in how many hours the entire population has worked, then divide by population. Now, furthermore, so what we can do is, so essentially, so if I write it here, so this is total hours population, then equal to total hours. Okay, so you should multiply. We're going to do the following. So we are going to modify labor force. We multiply labor force in the numerator and the denominator at the same time. So this must hold, right? But however, if we just look at these separately, right? So look at total hours divided by labor force divided by population. That's what we're going to get. We are going to get hours per worker times participation rate. Or in other words, we are going to decompose this change in hours per person into margin. Margin means like two different aspects. One is intensive, the other is extensive. So I will understand what does intensive and extensive means. Intensive, which means so you are in labor force or you are working. You're going to change hours per work. You continuous change from 0 to like 30 hours per week. What extensive margin? You decide I work or not. I'm in labor force or not. This is like discrete choice. So this is what we call intensive versus extensive margin. Now, if we look at it here, first look at hours per worker. Right? It seems there isn't much difference. There isn't much difference, right? So there isn't much difference both in terms of look at same year and then look at overtime. Okay, so overtime, the change is very, very small. However, if we look at employment to population ratio, so essentially this tell you the participation. Now we see the difference. Female almost doubled, male is dropping, and average is slightly increased. Okay. Or to summarize, so hours worked per person have been roughly constant. Hours per worker also roughly constant. But there's a large reallocation of working hours from male to female, meaning so there are less male participate in labor force, but there's almost double in women who participate in labor force. What possible explanation are there? Economists find out, so what there certainly there are many things, right? So for example, so the equal rights movement, right? So the improve the gender gap, so on and so forth, right? But we find out one thing is particularly interesting or particularly opinion to understand this change, which is improve the technology in home sector. Meaning, so at home, I mean, to do the housekeeping become easier, cheaper, more convenient, right? So now you have washing machines, dishwashers, you have vacuums, and you have home delivery, internet, shopping online, so on and so forth. So before this has been done manually, right? But this improved technology in home sector, housekeeping, actually implicitly that's going to increase the opportunity cost for someone to stay at home. Why? It's because before, without this technology, so you stay at home and then you can do these things for yourself. Yes, you can ask somebody else to do, but then you have to pay, right? At the end of ways, so the cost of doing this housekeeping is pretty much the same as you just go out work and make some wage income. But this technology dramatically reduce the cost of doing such housekeeping. So that just means if you do this yourself, and then so you just save a very little money, but then you're going to forego the high wage you're going to earn in the in the market. So in that sense, the increased opportunity cost of staying home, and this is particularly true for women, because usually they were good at doing this housekeeping, right? So that's just partially explained. So why the labor force participation rate for the women increased significantly after World War II. Right. Now we move to the third case study to understand distortionary tax, how distortionary tax change the competitive equilibrium. Here we are going to study a theory that was proposed by Arthur Lover. And he was President Reagan's economic advisor during 1980 US election. So President Reagan, he was famous for his economic policy, and sometimes we call it Reagan economics. So the main idea of Reagan's economics, and certainly, so he benefited a lot from Lover advocate his economic principle to President Reagan, and Reagan applied his economic theory in policy making. The main advice President Reagan received is the following. First, decrease in income tax. And secondly, so this decrease in income tax will increase the hours worked. And overall, so this is going to increase the tax burden. Or in other words, lower tax rate not necessarily means lower tax burden. Right, so this is Lover's argument. And then later, so this idea has been disputed by other presidents, like President Bush, the first president, the old Bush, and he called Reagan's policy as voodoo economics. But however, in 2001, the younger Bush, and he used most or less the same argument as President Reagan, right? And reduce the tax, and eventually this tax cut has been extended by Obama. But largely that's just because of the financial crisis. So they're trying to reduce the tax to stimulate the economy. So this is a quick history of the economic thoughts on how tax can affect our economy. Now we are going to use a simple model to really understand what's the argument behind Lover, and to understand so whether his arguments really work. Right. We start with a simple production function. Right now, so this production function becomes linear. Okay, so this is the simplest possible way to understand this complex issue. And certainly we can have like the production function we had before, like say z times, if you remember, so earlier we have something like this, z times k raised to the power 36 and n 0.64, right? So this is what we discussed when we explain what is TFP, right? Or in general, so here this just says, so you have production function. It's like concave, right? Apologize. With concave, right? So now, so here we are going to use something simple. Okay, so we are going to look at this linear technology. As you're going to see, this is going to simplify the analysis dramatically, but without lose much insight. Okay. So then, so we have this consumption function, right? Actually, this, to be precise, this is production possibility frontier. Remember how we get here? So this is because, so C equal to Y minus G, or Y equal to Z times N, but N equal to Z times, N equal to H minus L. So this is how we get, right? But the next, oh, by the way, so right. So now we are going to look at consumers' budget constraint, right? Consumer budget constraints are as follows. So they have, this is the labor supply they provide, and this is a wage, but multiplied by 1 minus T. So this is a tax rate. So this 1 minus T just means for each dollar I earn, so the government is going to take away T dollars. I'm going to have 1 minus T. That's what I get. Right? So this is for each dollar. And finally, you have pi. This is a profit. Now let's look at firm's problem. Firms trying to maximize, let me write here explicitly, maximize profit. Profit equal to Y minus W times D. Remember, this is the cost of labor. Okay? Now we end up with here. And then, so if you took intermediate micro, you should immediately realize the in equilibrium, profit equal to 0. Why? There are two possibilities. Profit is positive, profit is negative. If it's negative, people is going to exit, they leave the market. If it's positive, there are more to join. Okay, and in equilibrium, the only possibility is pi equal to 0. Because in either case, you're going to change the state quo, right? Because profit is high, and then more is going to join, and then more competition, and it's bring down the profit. If the profit is too low, and then people start to leave until they just break even. So you can see, so that's the benefit of use this linear technology. You end up with Z equal to, sorry, W equal to Z. Now we just plug in, and hence we have consumers budget constraint. Right, so this is essentially, this is W and plus pi, but pi equal to 0. Okay. Now we are ready to look at the competitive equilibrium, right? We use a diagram, right? So this is consumers budget. Wait a second. No, so this is a production possibility frontier, right? So sorry, this is a production possibility frontier, right? And the clearly is of households, what they can do is just shows you here, right? So this is what we have. Now let's look at how government tax revenue is going to change with T. So what this tells us, on the left side is total tax revenue. Tax revenue equal to what? T is the tax rate. Remember, for each dollar I earn, T dollars goes to the government, and 1 minus T is goes to myself. Okay, so for each dollar I earn, the government is going to take over T. Now, what is this? So this is D essentially is W. And inside here, so this is N, labor supply, right? And why you have L as a function of T, so it says the leisure is a function of T. Right, leisure is going to depend on your tax rate. Now let's go back to previous one. Right. So why leisure is going to depend on a function of T? So it simply is because, remember, okay, why government wants the tax? So tax essentially goes to G, right? So higher G, higher T, or higher T, higher G. Higher G means these things are going to move down. And certainly that's going to change my consumption and the leisure choice. So that's why T or tax rate is going to enters the argument for leisure. Okay. So summarize, this is how tax revenue is going to vary with tax rate. Okay. So this is a labor demand, right? Because this just says when wage, right? So this says, okay, so how wage is going to change with labor demand, right? And here this is a straight line is simply because the wage must equal to Z. That's what we have discussed in previous one, right? All right, so now we are ready to look at the change in tax, how changing tax affects the consumer choice, right? Now we start with the case, the simplest case is without, right, so this is without tax, right, that probably we should write that minus G, anyway, so, or the tax rate equals 0, and then you have this production possibility frontier, right, so this is in terms of C and L. Now if you have a tau, and then this thing is going to decline, right, because you're going to take lower, you're going to take less. And then not only so this entire thing go down and the curve becomes flatter, right? Why it becomes flatter? It's just because so the effective wage is going to decrease. Now clearly you can see so the equilibrium is going to change from E to H. The certainty, so this is largely coming from the substitution effect, but certainly so you can do the things as we did it earlier, right? So we are going to have, what are we going to have? We are going to have like a difference between substitution and income effect. Let me see. So how we're going to draw the third line. All right. So we are going to do this. Okay. So you can tell me. So here I draw a dotted line. So this dotted line is parallel with the find a new PPA. And then you move from here to here. This is coming from pure substitution effect, right? Because why? So if you compare this solid line with this dotted line, so this dotted line tangent with original I2, which keep the income. But now this dotted line is much flatter compared to original solid line because your take-home wage is lower. Meaning so the leisure becomes less expensive. Hence, you're going to increase the leisure. So it goes to here. Right. But on the other hand, so you move from this dotted line to this solid line, there is a negative income effect. Negative income effect, and then so you're going to reduce C and reduce L. Reduce leisure. Right. So that's why how we get here. Let me just erase here, kind of redraw to make sure we understand. So what I'm doing here is to draw a parallel line. Okay. So this line, let's just call it, let's call this PPF1, PPF3, and this is PPF2, right? So PPF1 to PPF2. So the only change is net wage. So you have substitution effect. And the PPF2 to PPF3. So the only change is income. So you have income effect. Right? So hence you're going to move from here, let's call it I don't know, let's call it X. Right? So and here, so you're going to move from E to X. And here you're going to move from X to H. Right. All right. So to summarize, what happens is, so you change your tax rate, you're going to have impact on your tax revenue. Why? Is because your leisure is going to change. That implies a change in labor supply. That's going to imply to total income, right? So by the way, so total income we should use. That's implies to change in total income, which is Z times NWT, but finally that's going to change the tax revenue. The tax revenue equal to tau times Z times NT. Okay, to be precise, let's call it, sorry, T tax rate times Z times H minus L T. And then why there's a humble shape? Let's go back, right? This is because, look, so there are two impact, right? So you increase your T, there are two effects. One is substitution, the other is income. So substitution effect says, look at here, so from E to H, your leisure is going to increase. But income effect says your leisure is going to decrease, right? It could be the case that tau decrease a lot. Let me compare two cases, right? If tau decrease very tiny, sorry, tau increase. If tau increase tiny, very small, right? And it could be the case of substitution effect smaller than income effect. But on the other hand, if tau increase huge, and the substitution effect is going to dominate income effect. All right, maybe use the next slide to summarize. Okay. So summarize here, T increase. When it is very small, very tiny, and it could be very big. All right, if it is small, and then the substitution effect, means you want to take more leisure because changing weight is so small, and the substitution effect is smaller than income effect. And it's very big, and then the substitution effect is going to dominate the income effect. Meaning, so here it means you're going to increase your leisure. Here you're going to decrease your leisure. All right. But furthermore, because in any case, furthermore, so this is the total tax revenue. It's going to depend on T and L, or L has T inside. Right? So that's why you have this humble shape. You have this humble shape. But then so clearly there's a optimal or this maximum revenue you can have, right? So you cannot tax too high, you cannot tax too low. Right? But then, so what is the argument behind President Reagan's tax cut, or later Bush, called voodoo economics? It must be the case they believe we are on the right hand side in this region, right? Because in this region, if you reduce tax, you can potentially increase tax revenue, right? Or if you are here and then you reduce tax, you're going to reduce tax revenue. Okay? So this is law of curve. Right. So now the last question is: the U.S. economy on the bad side of the lumber curve? Now we can look at data. Okay. President Reagan, so cut tax in 1981. President Bush, the younger Bush, cut tax in 2001. But afterwards, so if we look at a total tax revenue, they drop in both cases. And then what this means, the main implications, it seems like we are on the good side of lumber curve, meaning so this tax cut may not be a good idea, right? So, oh, by the way, so just look at it here. So this is this. Apology. So just look at it here. 1980, there's a tax cut, leads to large decline in tax revenue. The other one, 2000, also leads to large decline in tax revenue. Right. So this is what we learn, or what this corresponds to this slide. Right. So now we have finished this chapter. to summarize what we have learned in this chapter. So we develop a closed economy, one period macro model. So this model, in this model, we bring firms and households. We bring households and firms together. And in this model, actually, we get wage, right? And we understand so how changing G, how changing TFP is going to affect, or changing tau tax, how these things change the competitive equilibrium, right? And we also study the notion of competitive equilibrium, and we study the Pareto optimum. Okay? And in the future chapter, we will develop a new model to understand what determines interest rate. Remember, so usually there are two prices. One is wage, the other is interest rate. For the moment, we only study what determines wage. So essentially, it's coming from this model, and then we have, and largely comes from the labor market clearing. All right. Okay, let's stop here for this lecture. And so we are going to continue in the next class.